Well, hi, everyone. It's so great to be here for the third in our series of Sustainable Sundays conversations, which gather diverse actors across our food system to explore different facets of good food for all. We're going to build on the previous themes of food traditions and culture and the critical role of smallholder farmers in nourishing people and planet. And this Sunday's conversation is going to focus on the important role of nutritious school meals for ensuring good food for all. 388 million children across the globe eat a school meal each day. And it's good food that's important investment in the next generation, keeping girls in school and ensuring all children are able to grow, learn, and thrive. School meals can also be transformative for local communities. They reduce food costs for households already faced with rising food prices from the COVID pandemic, and where locally sourced school meals support the livelihoods of local producers and farmers. So in this way, school meals is good food that strengthens our communities, powers our economies, and protects our planet. So without further ado, let me invite Dr. Kalibata, the president of AGRA, the former UN Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit, and the convener of this series, Sustainable Sundays, to join me on screen. Welcome, Agnes. So great to see you. You're in Nairobi today?
I am in Nairobi. Thank you for having me, Paul. I am in Nairobi today and I look forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. So, we as we start, we talk about how food is so deeply personal and it connects us to places, to a culture, to a memory. And we're talking about school meals today. What particular school meal do you remember from your childhood?
So depends on what you call childhood. Half the time until end of primary, I really was not in a situation where we had school meals back then. So we really went to school and either we carried lunch from our families, or we just stayed at school and in the evening went home. So I think school meals came a little bit later. When I went to secondary school, definitely school meals became important. But in terms of a young age, let me just say what that taught me, the fact that those school meals were not available. I mean, there are quite a number of children that you definitely knew were not having even the first meal at home in the morning. And what difference school meals today make is the fact that for those kids that are not able to have that meal, it doesn't keep them out of school, number one. Number two, it's extremely important for focus and concentration, right? So teachers really struggle to keep those type of kids engaged when they don't have food. So I would say that one thing definitely that school meals have solved for is ensuring that kids stay in school. Another thing is ensuring that kids are engaged throughout the day as they study. So at least I can relate to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what you're saying there is that lack of school meals can be really challenging for concentration. It also doesn't set everyone up on an equal starting point in school because you don't have that element. So, school meals, the conversation around them has been changing. It continues to sort of shift. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's kind of shifting towards nutritious or locally sourced ingredients in food? What's some of the things you're seeing around school meals in recent times?
Yeah, so one of the things that when school meals started, especially in Africa, one of the things that you just keep remembering is how you see two things. It's posho, what we call posho here, which is maize meal, and beans, right? To the extent that actually, if you remember my quote from last time, it's like, how many times will I eat beans again? So you get to eat these things until it becomes like your second nature. So what we are seeing now, that is something that is evolving. What we are seeing now is the evolution from that maize and beans as the two things that people will eat at school into vegetables, into thinking about milk for children, into thinking about even an egg once in a while. And I think the most important part of all that is recognizing that there are local value chains, that there are local communities that can be part of enhancing school feeding. This theory really comes from work that was done, a lot of work that was done through World Food Programme and the government of Brazil, and they really have demonstrated that local communities can work with schools to feed children and ensure that it is enriching communities at the same time. So you're hitting two birds with the same stone. You're ensuring that kids are getting fresh food straight from their farms and their parents' farms, and parents are appreciating. That's something that's not said, but parents begin to appreciate the nutritional value of the food that schools are demanding for, and that's what they start feeding kids at school as well, in addition to the fact that they have a little bit more money to be able to access things they don't produce at home. So I think that evolution is the direction that is anchored in local sourcing, the direction that we must continue taking.
Yeah. And in terms of like, how do you feel that these school meals are really empowering the next generation and also the local communities? Like, how do they, what do they do in a community when you do have a good school meals program?
So you would, it's really interesting because one thing about universal school education, which is one of the things now we do nearly across the board here on the African continent, where you're trying to make sure that literacy improves, that every kid has access to education. One thing that is not said is the fact that these kids need food, and there's no guarantee that where they're coming from, they actually have access to food. So that ability to have a decent and nutritious meal, even if it is one at school, completely makes a difference. But there's something you said that is extremely important, that equity around school that comes with the ability of children that are in school at the same time to have the same level of concentration because they don't have to worry about food is something that is changing how school works. And then the ability to stay in school. You know, we talk about it, but I don't think we talk about it enough when kids can actually go to school, or kids are actually attracted to school because there's a meal there, or parents are sending kids to school because there's a meal in one place. So I think those are elements that are extremely important, but I guess the most important is the fact that children are receiving decent food that helps build their body and their brains at a very early age when they need it the most. For example, in Rwanda, we do what we call 1 cup of milk per child at a very early age, recognizing the importance of that in building the brain infrastructure of the kid, and how if that is damaged, it really becomes a challenge. So really that stage of development is very critical to the nature of human being we will have later. Yeah, no, 100%. No, I completely agree. The UN Food Systems Summit, how did school meals really feature in the summit process? Like, how did they come through? What were some of the results of that conversation? So the UN Food Systems Summit was characterized by a number of things, but the most important of which is it happened during COVID-19. And COVID-19 brought out a few things. The two for me that are associated with school meals that I remember very well is the fact that about 370 million children could not get a decent meal because of the disruption in how people access food, which came with COVID-19. So again, all these kids we are trying to keep in school, all these kids whose meal, a decent meal depends on that school meal they were looking for, was disrupted. So that's number one. Number two is the vulnerabilities that became so bare because people lost jobs. People were living just one meal away from starvation, or people were not able to put the same level of nutrition on the table. So by the time the conversation around school meals happened, there was a whole lot of anxiety that is happening because of those two things. So it was probably one of the most sought after, one of the most engaged coalition that came through. And again, it was based on the fact that people are looking to get back on track, feeding children. Yeah. People are looking to get back on track on reducing vulnerabilities. And also we're looking to see how school meals can be part of dealing with the challenge of vulnerabilities among producer communities like smallholder farmers around local sourcing. So it's a coalition that's definitely done very well.
Yeah, no, and it seems to be a coalition that has a very large number of partners already and high level of commitment, which is great. And I think that connection that you talk about with vulnerability and also, you know, trying to provide that equality, I think is really key. So look, Agnes, it's so great to have you with us. What food did you bring today, and why did you bring it?
So I did bring a mango.
Yeah.
So Kenya is a beautiful place to find mangoes. So if you're looking at it and salivating, it's because it's actually really beautiful. And the reason I brought
it looks tasty. It looks very ripe. It looks perfect mango, actually.
So just to make you feel guilty, I have several. So even to make you feel
bought one
bad.
To share.
Yeah. But the reason I brought a mango is, you know, I look back. When I was in secondary school, I went to a good secondary school. I mean, in university. I mean, we ate well. But you know what? I actually don't remember eating the fruits at school, you know, from a school meal.
Yeah.
So since we are talking about school meals, I thought it is really, really important that we should mention the place of fruits and eating fruits and vegetables, of course, in school meals. The life we live as bodies, as human beings, is so much dependent on vitamins. And just not being able to provide those vitamins to children at a very young age is one of the things that deprives them of the right level of growth. And really, let's get our fruits in those plates of school children.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it, Agnes. Well, thank you. I'm going to bring our other panelists in today, and get them to introduce ourselves. And I think, you know, that role of nutrients and fruits and diversity of food is really critical. I know I bought banana bread, which is made from bananas that were going like quite black on the outside. They were very ripe. And often that's something that gets thrown out. But in our house, we always make banana bread with it. And then it extends the life of the banana even longer, which is another way to, I suppose, get fruits and vegetables just in a different way. But let's invite our other panelists to turn their cameras on. Perfect. So let's welcome, guys. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and the food ingredient that you bought. Maybe Chef Ann, should we start with you?
Great, thank you. Thanks for having me here. Chef Ann Cooper from the Chef Ann Foundation. I've worked in school food for over 20 years. I've worked as a director of food services for school districts, and I also have a foundation that works in every state in the United States, touching over 3 million kids in over 13,000 schools. I brought two things today. One is something that we might serve in a school, and this is a lentil stew. So plant-based lentil stew. And these lentils happen to be grown by one of the local farmers here. And the other thing the Chef Ann Foundation does, and that we really support, is salad bars in schools, because we know how important it is for kids to have fresh fruits and vegetables. So I brought some lettuce and carrots from one of the local farms. And we're in the middle of winter here, so it's still snowing. So to be able to get lettuce and carrots this time of year is just really great.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chef Ann. Okay, over to you, Peiman.
Thanks, Paul. Pleasure to be with you, Agnes, Chef Ann, and Wawira here. So I'm a director of the Food Initiative with the Rockefeller Foundation based in Nairobi. I'm originally from Brazil. Agnes was saying that kind of this is where sort of school feeding as such a big concept emerged. It's still one of the largest school feeding programs in the world. And the meal I brought is actually, I hope you can see it, It's actually very similar to the typical meal that school kids will have here in East Africa. What you'll see here, though, I want to highlight, because I'll talk about this later, is that the ugali, which is this maize meal that you have here, is not just refined flour ugali. It's actually fortified whole grain ugali. And we'll talk more about that when my turn comes.
That's awesome. Awesome. And you're in, where are you at the moment? You're in Rwanda, are you?
No, I'm based in Nairobi.
In Nairobi. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Great. And Wawira.
Hi, everyone. It sounds like we have a huge Nairobi crew on this call. I'm also based in Nairobi, and we should all just meet up later after this. But I run an organization called Food for Education that provides meals to kids in public primary schools here in Kenya. We provide nutritious meals. My background is I'm a nutritionist, so really passionate about nutrition and kids accessing nutritious meals. And we use technology to make sure that there is efficiency in production and distribution of meals. And we also locally source our produce. I brought today a fruit, actually, and I loved what Dr. Kalibata said about fruits in schools, because we actually serve fruits with our meals at Food for Education. And banana is typically the fruit that we serve during our meals, and sometimes we'll serve mangoes or avocados or whatever is in season. But I brought bananas because it's something that I think, has very high in potassium and the kids really enjoy, and that, makes our school meals all the way better for providing fruit with them. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
No, it's great. And Wawira, I've been to some of your school feeding programs and served at some of your school feeding programs, and so I know the joy that happens as the kids are coming. And it's great. You're a really good storyteller that often highlights this emotional connection that we have to school meals and some of the memories of that. But as a nutritionist, can you tell us also just maybe a little bit about why nutritious meals are critical for the growth and learning of school children as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think, as I'll kind of piggyback on what Dr. Kalibata was talking about, universal education in a lot of African countries and in a lot of places around the world, but school feeding being really the lever that is not being pulled on yet to ensure that kids are able to stay in school and learn. So if you look at kids' growth and development, when we talk about vitamins, when we talk about amino acids, that is all the brain juice that you need to grow your brain. Protein energy malnutrition being super high here in Africa. And so we're really looking at, school feeding as being the lever that we need to pull right now to improve retention, to improve attendance, to improve performance. And there's a lot of evidence across different geographies that show that school feeding works, and ensuring that kids have access to nutritious meals has exponential returns, not just on economies, if there's local sourcing, but also on, the kids and how they're able to learn and stay in school. So I think, food especially can have the motive running to the lunch line, like we see every day at Food for Education. But when kids eat nutritious food, the potential is limitless for them, and they're able to stay in school and learn and achieve all their wildest dreams.
Yeah. And I'm just staying with you for a second. I mean, you started in 2012 and today you're reaching, is it 35,000 or 33,000? I know it's growing. You keep opening new.
It keeps growing. Yeah, it's gonna be 100,000 this year. So yeah, we're pushing towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you also, are using simple technologies and really taking this whole holistic approach in the sourcing, the cooking, how you even do the energy efficient cooking. Can you just give us a little bit of a snapshot just how that works? Because I think, when I think of school meals, I think of what I'm trying to do for my kids or what's going on at my local school. When you get to that kind of 35 to 100,000 people, it's a very different kind of scale and model. And I think it's interesting just how you're approaching that.
Yeah, for sure. So our approach is really, locally rooted and created. So I'm Kenyan, grew up in Kenya, and I really wanted to, and our team is really, a lot of our team is Kenyan, focused on how do we build on local solutions and local, for example, sourcing. So from sourcing, we have a wide network of smallholder farmers, middle scale farmers, aggregators that we use to source our ingredients. We have 4 main ingredients, which are maize, rice, beans, and lentils. And then we have our vegetables that we add to each meal, and we have fruit as well. And we use a local sourcing network that we built here in Kenya and around the region. And then we bring the food, the produce is brought centrally we have multiple kitchens across the country. And in these kitchens, we cook our meals and then distribute them to schools. So to ensure sustainability, we make sure that students are, parents are contributing for these meals. And because the barrier for school meals is really that, first of all, can it be cheap enough? Is it nutritious? Is it high quality? We make sure that we provide high quality nutritious meals at the lowest cost possible. So for just 15 US cents, which is 15 shillings here in Kenya, parents contribute for the meals. We use mobile money, and the kids usually wear this technology, which is just a wristband that is an essential lunch ATM. So the same way you go to the supermarket and you pay for your groceries is the same way kids come to school and they access their meals, but for a much lower cost than your groceries at the supermarket, but also very high quality, to ensure that kids are getting the right nutrition. We've tracked, education performance, we've tracked outcomes, and we see, enrollment better in schools that are being served versus schools that are not served, performance. So we're refining that and growing that exponentially here in Kenya to ensure that more kids have access to nutritious meals.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Dr. Kalibata, I don't know if you have any reflections on this, but I think this is, to me, really, really interesting to see how scalable this is, but also the sustainability of, the parents contributing a very small amount. The way that all interacts, I think, is great. I don't know, Agnes, if you have any reflections or comments, just as we're hearing from Wawira.
No, I think the whole idea of engaging parents in participating in school feeding has a number of implications and has a number of opportunities. I think for me, the biggest opportunity is really helping them understand two things: the value of food in terms of nutrients and nutrition, because it's not that these parents don't have this food, but sometimes they just don't understand how the food can be used and harnessed to ensure that it is offering the best nutrition to children. So that is something that can be done. The second is also quality of food in terms of standards. Food can be also detrimental to people's health if it is coming with damage, if it has diseases, if it has whatever. And these are some of the challenges we deal with. So we shouldn't look at it only from a participation perspective, which is extremely important, participation in terms of reducing the cost of doing business for school feeding, which is really, really important and good. But we should also look at it as something that is enhancing how participating parents are themselves being empowered to be able to feed their families better. So it's a two-way, and I think we should really encourage it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's great. And I think, just that interaction that happens around food is critical. And I think educating people about the value of food is really critical as well. And I think, as those meals come that are hot, they're nutritious with all those kinds of additions, it also helps people understand what is important for feeding their kid. And I think that's key. No, that's great.
I was going to say that maybe we can take it a notch higher. And while we look at it from, if we are going to engage parents, and we should do more engagement of parents, we should also celebrate food. We should also just, in terms of engaging parents, because, for example, the school where my kid goes to school, so many kids meet there from different cultures. And I think one of the things we miss is the ability to bring different cultures together through school to celebrate the food culture of these these different cultures that are meeting through school. So I think there's a missed opportunity there to just enhance that community fellowship around school and something that brings us all together, which is the culture of food.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, absolutely. Well, look, let me bring you in, Chef Ann, and thank you for joining at such an early hour in the US. I know it's early morning for you, but it's terrific to have you as part of this conversation. And I know we're going to share as part of this a recipe that you've done of a school meals dish, which is curried green vegetables, veggies, and tofu. And I'd like to play a little bit of it now, and then we'll share the rest of it afterwards so that people can actually have a look and make the dish. But do you want to just frame a little bit about this dish and how did it come about before we put it on? And then we'll watch a little bit and then come back and hear from you a little bit more.
I think why we have this whole series of recipes is sort of what we've all been talking about. It's engaging parents so that parents understand how they can make very delicious, nutritious, healthy foods, plant-based, that they can make them at home and that we can serve them in school. So to connect what we're doing in the schools to what parents can do at home. And that's how this whole recipe series came about. There's dozens of recipe videos on the Chef Ann website. There's actually hundreds of school food recipes on the website. And it's really about showcasing plant-forward, plant-based meals.
Yeah, well, let's put it on and then we'll watch just a little taster of it, I think, and then we'll share that. But I love that you've got, and let's put that on, but I love that you've also got a lot of others that people can go to have a look at, and we'll make sure we put that link in as well so that people can go and check that out as well. But let's see a little bit of this now.
Okay, so first things first, we want to get our tofu cooking. I've got my large skillet with about 2 ounces of olive oil, and I just turned my heat on to medium high. And while that's cooking, I want to share a little tip on what I like to do with tofu. I purchased one 14-ounce package of extra firm tofu. I drained it, pressed it to remove as much moisture as I can, and cut it into small cubes. Now I'm going to add this to a bowl, season it with a little salt and pepper, and then add about a tablespoon of cornstarch to the tofu. Stir it to combine so that all of the cubed tofu has a lightly coat of cornstarch on it. This is going to help the tofu get a little bit of extra crispiness onto it while it's cooking. Then we're just going to add it to our pan and cook for about 3 minutes or until it starts to get golden in color and slightly crispy. Okay, so my tofu is cooked, so I'm just going to use a slotted spoon and remove the tofu from my pan. There were a couple pieces that crumbled, and that's fine. I'm using a paper towel lined plate just to kind of absorb some of the excess oil, and then we're just gonna set this aside for later. I'm going to start adding my veggies and my flavor. First is 1 green bell pepper. I'm using 2 cloves of garlic and about 2 ounces of ginger. So I've minced them together. And next I'm going to add a jalapeno. I've used 1 jalapeno, which is about 2 ounces, small dice. Really, this is where the heat for this recipe is coming from. It all is coming from the ginger and the jalapeno. I've removed the seeds and most of the inside membrane of the jalapeno just so it's not too hot.
Chef Ann, this is great to see. And I love that you're really kind of educating parents about cooking techniques as well as ingredients and how to utilize them. And I think, you know, it's great to know that these resources are out there. And I think this really goes to what Dr. Kalibata was talking about in terms of really educating parents on the value of food and how to create a nutritious meal. So, you know, help me understand, like, the Chef Ann Foundation, you founded in 2009, and it was really about ensuring equal access to fresh, healthy, delicious food for all children. How did this start? What's the landscape like in the US, and how's it changing around school meals?
Well, I started 20-something years ago in school food, and my background is a white tablecloth chef. So I was cooking in high-end restaurants and hotels. And then I came to understand that the most important thing we could do was feed kids healthy food and teach them about healthy food and teach their families about healthy food. When I got into school food, almost everything was processed. It all came out of a package or a bag. It was highly processed. There were no whole ingredients. So I started in the school districts I worked in, and then through the foundation, of making everything from scratch. And that's the idea here, is get away from packaged and processed and chemically laden food to serve real healthy food in schools and to show people that it's possible. And when we think about school food today, especially post-pandemic, a lot of schools that had transitioned to healthy scratch-cooked food had kind of gone backwards to processed foods. And now we're really working hard to get those schools to go back to cooking, to go back to cooking from whole ingredients and not opening cans and packages and pre-made, highly processed foods.
Yeah, no, I mean, and so the importance of scratch cooking in this kind of affordability, because I know price is a big challenge in the US around school meals. How do you balance that, and how do you kind of push that way, that direction? Do people embrace that? Is that accepted? How does that work?
Well, as we all know, or at least here in the States, vegetables and plant-based foods are much cheaper when they're made from whole ingredients as opposed to processed plant-based foods than, a lot of animal protein. So one of the things we try and do is get people to cook from scratch and use a lot of plant-based ingredients. And that really makes a difference, and that really helps. So yes, affordability is a problem, but if you cook from scratch, you may have more money in staffing, but that's a good place to put money. But the food itself might cost less because it's whole ingredients and not highly processed. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And so how do you think, from your perspective, do we make a sort of societal shift to view school meals as an investment for people and planet and as a tool to achieve good food for all?
It's a work in progress here in the States every day. We have had all during COVID free meals for all kids, and it was called universal meals. And Congress just passed a budget that got rid of it, or got rid of the USDA, the Department of Agriculture's ability to have these waivers in place. So it looks like that the next school year will not have free meals for all students. And that's really a travesty. So where we thought coming out of the pandemic, people realized the importance of healthy school meals for all, we've taken a step backwards. So it's a continuing fight. We're seeing a lot of individual states here in the US pass healthy school meals for all, but the federal government has not embraced it. And it's so important, especially as it supports local farmers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think thanks, Chef Ann, for all that you're doing, but also for, this contribution and really driving that kind of conversation across the US. Bringing you in, Peiman, what strikes you about this conversation to that so far? We've heard from Wawira and Chef Ann and Dr. Kalibata. What's striking you about the conversation?
I mean, I think one is, let's say, this universal consensus among those that really get it, right? About how important this is for building the human capital of nations, right? And how every dollar invested in school feeding reverts to over $9 in terms of GDP and the country's economies. But it's just a tough world where, there's always limitations of budgets. I mean, in fact, one can say that the biggest barrier towards improved school meals right now is really cost, right? So that's why it's great to see innovations such as the ones that Wawira is bringing about and Chef Ann to, let's say, try to improve meals as budget neutrally as possible, right? I mean, not that we shouldn't continue to advocate for more money for nutrition and school feeding. We absolutely should. But in the meantime, there's a lot of good to be done just by working backward from existing budgets and see what kinds of menu changes we can make to make meals more nutritious, again, as budget neutrally as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So we heard from Dr. Kalibata that there was a school meals coalition that emerged from the UN Food Systems Summit in September 2021. Can you tell us a little bit about the aim of this coalition and how it's delivering on this kind of vision around school meals? We can't hear you. You're on mute. Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
So
it's remarkable. It's remarkable that the School Meals Coalition I think turned out to be the strongest coalition to emerge from the whole Food System Summit process, with over 60 member states and a lot of good momentum involving both the global north, the global south. But the coalition has an ambitious vision to provide every child worldwide with a healthy meal in school by 2030. So the idea is, let's get children back to school, and then let's keep them there, well-nourished and, with the ability to learn and retain knowledge. Because, school feeding is really the world's largest safety net. And the coalition wants to reach that vision, but basically through three objectives. One is, let's just first restore what we had, right? Pre-COVID, we had almost 400 million kids being fed at schools. Let's try to build back up to that point. Then let's reach those we missed, because even with those 400 million, those are still not the totality of children we can reach through school feeding. So there's an element also of increasing the efficiency of programs, and then improving the approach, both in terms of quality and efficiency, so that we can facilitate this healthy food environment around schools, promote safe and nutritious foods, diverse diets, and also, let's say, promote the local supply chains and shift them towards the production of more nutritious foods. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So to build on some of these points, we wanted to also bring in Miss Immaculée Mukurasanga, who's a local smallholder farmer from Rwanda, who we've got a very short video we're just going to show about her contribution to a local school meals program that's impacted her farm community and her family. So let's put this video on and we'll just have a quick look at that.
Amazina yanjye nitwa Mukarusanga Immaculée, ndi umunyamuryango wa Veggies muhinzi. Ubu ukuvuga ngo nuguhinga mugamije isoko kandi na cya gikoni tukarya tukihaza. Ukuvuga ngo mu bworozi nkora nta mwana anywa amata, kandi natwe turayanywa. Mwabonye ko afite n'umukecuru ukuze, ubona ko ahakerera nyine ari sava. Koperative Veggies muhinzi nyimazemo imyaka 6. Narajyamo nari umuhinzi usanzwe, twahingaga mu buryo bw'akajagari tutagamije isoko pe. Umuntu yavuga ati ndariye ndaramutse n'ibyo. Ariko kujya muri koperative, burya iyo abantu bishyize hamwe bahuza imbaraga, na wa wundi udafite imbaraga akazamukira kuri ba bandi bafite imbaraga. No kuvuga ngo icyo byamariye byamfashije, n'abaterankunga basanga abantu bari hamwe, ntabwo bari kusanga mu rugo ngo bamenye ngo jewe nubwo munzi kubera ko ndi muri Veggies muhinzi. Ibyo ni ukuvuga ngo iryo ni isoko kandi dushima ko rihoraho, amafaranga akaboneka, umuryango ugatekana, kubera ko gutanga mituweli bitangirwa igihe, ubuzima bukagenda neza. No kugira ngo tujye mu bimina nabyo tubikesha amafaranga yagiye ava muri uriya musaruro. Ayo mu bimina nabyo tukayakoramo ubworozi, nk'iriya nka yagiye iva mu kimina bitewe inkunga n'uwo musaruro ujyanwa na PAM n'ubwishingizi. Mvugo kuwufata ntabwo iwihererana, igenda ikwirakwiza mu bigo by'amashuri, abana bacu bakarya, umwana akava ku ishuri rwose ubona akomeye ameze neza, nta kibazo yagize ari wa wundi uciye hasi utaza saa sita ngo abone icyo arya nawe agasangira n'abandi ubwo bakagira iki usangira buzima bakumva ko bose ari bamwe ibyo rero nibyo kwishimirwa cyane.
So as we've just seen this in this great video, and I just loved how she said it's great to see how that produce, you know, gets to kids. And I think these kinds of partnerships are amazing. Peiman, you're working on a similar project in Nairobi, which includes milling and fortification. Can you just tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure, it's actually in Rwanda, so it was to me especially delightful to see this video. But yeah, so Rockefeller and WFP, together with other partners in Rwanda and in Africa, have supported the development of a Rwandan innovation that we really think has global potential, and that is the idea of fortified whole grains or fortified whole grain foods, right? I mean, if you think about it, what we do currently with grains doesn't make any sense because we serve kids and the population in general with refined grains and flours. We serve the carbohydrate-rich but nutrient-poor part, and we divert the nutrient-dense parts of the grain to essentially animals, right, and animal feed. So we think there is an opportunity with, let's say, smart investments to enable the production of fortified whole grain foods at cost parity with their refined counterparts. So this is what we wanted to test, this proposition in partnership with WFP in Rwanda. That's an innovation that we tried out in 18 schools between October and December last year, serving almost 14,000 students in southern Rwanda. And we also sensitized both school children, parents, and the staff about the benefits of fortified foods and whole grain foods. And the results were very positive. I mean, at the end of the pilot, we had 97% of the students in grade 6, for example, preferring the ugali made from the fortified whole grain flour over the one that they were being served, which is, again, refined white ugali flour. 77% of parents even said that if they could find this at the market at the same cost as the refined flour, they would prefer this product. So I think this shows that schools are really a great platform to build these lifelong healthy habits in terms of nutrition, health, wash, what have you, but also to sort of build preferences, right, that sow the seeds of a market for nutritious foods, right, that you want to grow. So the intent is not just the immediate impact on school children, which is of course critical, but also to grow the market for nutritious foods in country. And if you think about it, I mean, grains and derived foods such as ugali, they typically represent by weight at least half of school meals in many African countries, right? So if we can do that shift from refined to fortified whole grain, I mean, it's relatively simple, but it's a substantial gain in terms of macronutrients, micronutrients, dietary fiber, and the like. So, with the success of this pilot, I mean, we are engaging the government in Rwanda to explore the scale up of this to all 3.3 million school children in Rwanda and in other African countries. But we're also working with local millers to strengthen their capacity to produce fortified whole grain flour that is safe, nutritious, affordable, and sustainably produced. So that's part of the whole plan. For us, I mean, this has led actually to forming a fortified whole grain alliance that is focused on promoting this production and consumption of fortified whole grains.
That's amazing. I really like that the drive there to really drive forward preferences as well. And I think, a lot of, in my work, a lot of conversations I've had with people where they misunderstand what fortification is, they misunderstand, what that is. And I think if you can kind of help educate people, then it's a really positive nutritional outcome. And it's also, a really easy way to really improve that kind of overall nutrition content of different dishes. which is great. So it's great to hear that it's scaling as well, and that the government's supporting. And I also like the partnership element where WFP is buying the ingredients, and there's this kind of symbiotic relationship between local farmers and then also the market, and trying to work out how that all connects. So, I mean, this has been an amazing conversation. We're coming up to the end of the session, but before we wrap, I just wanted to hear any final reflections from any of you on what you've seen or heard today. Any reflections? Let's see.
So I just think it's so great that we're seeing people from all over the world really care about what we feed our kids. And as everyone said, there's really nothing more important. Hungry kids can't learn, malnourished kids can't think. We really need to feed our kids good, healthy food in every single country in the world. And it really should be a birthright that these kids are eating healthy food in school so they can be the best they can be. And it's what we all need to do.
Absolutely. Well, we're
I echo Chef's Ann's words and everyone else on the panel. I think that it's really encouraging and exciting to see everyone on this call. I'm sure everyone who will be tuning in, believing that school feeding and school meals are as powerful as they are for children, and I think for the future of the world. I'll leave, my parting shot is around the number that you started off with, Paul, around 388 million children receiving school meals. But the World Food Program reports only 53 million, I think, are in Africa. And so I think that when we're thinking about school feeding, Africa is definitely a region where we need to step up, because we are, essentially the world's youngest continent, but not feeding nearly enough of our children here.
Yeah. Agnes, did you want to jump in?
Sure, Paul, thank you so much. And I just wanted to appreciate and thank everyone that has participated. And really just go back to the point around the innovation that is in this particular conversation, what everybody's trying to do to make sure that we get decent food to children. It's an investment in the future, and we should definitely be working together in ways like this to ensure that we are getting this food to children. And for me, we really must live with one thing, that good food must be available to all. That's what we must be about. So really thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Agnes. Thank you to all of you. It's been such a rich conversation. And I just want to add 2 points. One is that I think, food is so deeply personal, and we all grew up as children. It's something that connects us. We all, were kids, and we all have memories of sitting with our school friends around a hot meal, or whatever we were able to have. And I think we can't lose this in our conversations. We have to make sure that we keep that there. And that I do think, I agree with you that school meals are a critical investment that's good for people, planet, and prosperity. And this is something that's really important that we need to keep putting forward. It's not a choice. This is an investment that's essential. So I want to thank our speakers for being, for the work that you're all doing, but for also being a part of this engaging and exciting discussion. It's really amazing to always hear from a breadth of actors in different parts of the world approaching a similar issue in different ways, and really bringing their own expertise to that to ensure that we see an outcome. And I think this is really key. And so on this Sustainable Sundays, we hope that this inspires action in the food system that can drive really tangible change for healthy people and planet. And I think the way that we can all do that is by eating a healthy, climate-friendly meal each week. And I know if you're looking for a place to start, you can try out Chef Ann's recipe of curried green veggies and tofu. I know that looked good. And I love that tip around adding a little bit of cornstarch to your tofu. It's an absolute works a treat in terms of giving that crisp on the out. Many people don't know how to engage with tofu, but it's something that I've learned to appreciate over time. and it can be really, really tasty. And those green veggies just looked amazing. So thank you all for joining. I hope you can join us again and keep an eye out for next month's conversation. So thanks, everyone.